I used to think betrayal was something that happened in the dark, in hushed phone calls, hastily deleted messages, carefully crafted lies. But sometimes people betray you openly, cruelly, and without even bothering to hide it. This Florida vacation was planned entirely by me. I chose the resort, booked the rooms, prepared everything down to each bottle of sunscreen for the kids. I thought I was rebuilding a fractured family. But standing in the glossy marble lobby, surrounded by soft music and the faint scent of expensive perfume, I realized I was the only one trying. "I booked 3 rooms," Damon said without even looking at me. "One for me, one for Ivy, and one for the kids." "What do you mean?" My voice was still soft, but my lips had begun to tremble. Damon pulled his wallet from his pocket and handed his card to the receptionist with his usual indifference. "I think this setup will be more comfortable for everyone. You know Ivy doesn't really like sharing space." Before I could exhale a response, I saw her. Ivy stepping out of the gift shop. Her blonde hair curled to perfection, her white dress hugging her body, every step radiating the confidence of someone who believed she belonged there. "Babe," she said, glancing at me before turning to Damon, "did you tell Layla yet? Or should I just do it myself?" I felt the eyes in the lobby begin to glance our way. No one said a word, but I knew they understood what was happening. 3 suitcases sat around my feet like unwanted baggage, and I, the legal wife, mother of 3 children, was being treated like an uninvited guest. "Where are we sleeping, Mom?" Ellie asked, her small hand clutching the edge of my shirt. She was only 8, still young enough to believe the world had room for fairness. Aiden and Noah stood silently beside me, but I saw the shadow darken in Aiden's eyes. Damon signed the registration papers with a flashy flick of the wrist. "Don't worry, kids, your mom's great at figuring things out," he said, like I was some hourly nanny. Ivy reached into her purse, pulled out a glossy beige handbag, and held it out toward me. "Room 602, Layla, would you mind taking this up for me while you're at it?" Her voice was sweet as syrup, but every word landed like stone. She called me sis, but her eyes treated me like hotel staff. I stared at the purse in her hand. For a brief moment, everything inside me screamed, throw it back at her, walk out, or say something in front of the kids. But I didn't. Not because I was weak, but because I knew I needed to observe more carefully. And silence, at that moment, was my first weapon. That evening, the Soleil restaurant, nestled right by the shoreline of the West Palm Shores resort, lit up with soft golden lights. Candlelight shimmered. The sound of distant waves mingled with the clink of cutlery. I had chosen this place months earlier, reserved an ocean view table, hoping for a dinner the whole family would remember. And it was memorable, just not in any way a wife would ever want. The kids and I sat at the table first, and I caught the hostess's awkward glance when she saw only the 3 children and me seated at a 6-person table. When Damon and Ivy arrived, they settled in like it was their private dinner. Ivy sat next to Damon, while I was nudged to the far end of the table like some distant relative who got invited out of obligation. "I hear the swordfish here is excellent, babe," Damon said to Ivy, resting his hand on her thigh like the kids and I weren't even there. Ellie pressed her lips together, eyes fixed on the swan-shaped napkin. Noah glanced at me discreetly, and Aiden exhaled quietly. We ordered. Ivy picked the most expensive dishes on the menu and made a point to tell the waiter she wanted the white wine properly chilled and served sommelier style. When the main course arrived, Damon raised his glass and, with a smirk, said, "Let's toast to an amazing vacation, and to Layla, who always brings along all the extra baggage." I looked at him. He smiled, waiting for me to do what I always did, force a smile, redirect the conversation, keep the peace. But there was nothing left to pretend. I set down my glass, slow and steady, dabbed the corner of my mouth with my napkin, folded it carefully, and placed it on the chair beside me. None of my 3 children moved. Ivy kept flipping the dessert menu. "Layla?" Damon said. "You're not going to make a scene again, are you?" he added, his usual preemptive jab before any confrontation. I just looked at him, a long, silent stare. Then I turned to the kids. Ellie leaned forward slightly. Aiden looked straight into my eyes, unblinking. And I left the table. I heard Ivy's chair scrape the floor, a fork clatter onto a plate. Damon called my name again, louder this time. But I kept walking. My face didn't move, my eyes held still. I simply watched, quietly, Outside the restaurant, I walked straight toward the main lobby. My phone began to vibrate as I stepped into the elevator. Damon's name lit up. Then a string of texts from his number. "What are you doing?" The kid saw everything. "Don't cause a scene." I didn't answer. I returned to the room I had booked myself, with my own credit card. The room no one else knew existed. Room 827 was mine. A decision I made 2 days before we left, after one sleepless night when my gut rang alarm bells. I told no one. Damon assumed I'd be sleeping with the kids. Ivy likely thought I'd be begging the front desk for a spare room. The door clicked shut behind me. I locked it and sank into the lounge chair facing the balcony, where the waves crashed steadily under the moonlight. The phone buzzed again. Damon. I powered it off. I opened my laptop. I logged into the First Bank, our joint account, opened 12 years ago, right after we got married. Damon always bragged about being the breadwinner, the financial mastermind, the smart investor, but in reality, I was the one filing taxes every year. I was the legal name on every asset. I was the one responsible for the banks, the lawyers, the accountant. Damon spent. I made sure he had something to spend. I started by transferring all our short-term investments, over $58,000 in mutual funds, into my personal account. Next was the vacation house in Colorado. On paper, Damon always told friends it was a house he'd bought with investment gains. The truth? Every ownership document carried just one name, Layla Annette Moore. I logged into the Legal e-platform and submitted a request to shift the usage rights to individual non-shared status. I selected the option Restrict Access to Second Party. Reason: change in marital status. 1 click. Then came Damon's secondary credit card. The one he used for client entertainment, which really meant spa days for Ivy, first-class flights, and thank-you gifts. I called the bank and requested all secondary cards be permanently deactivated. "Would you like us to notify the secondary cardholder?" "I'm the primary, no need to notify." My voice was so calm, the customer rep actually paused. When everything was done, it was 11:23 p.m. I called the emergency number for my personal attorney, the one Damon believed handled only real estate paperwork. In truth, she had quietly been helping me since 2 years ago, after Damon once cut off my card just because I didn't use the right tone. "Layla," Andrea's voice came through the line, "are you in Florida? I need to initiate a legal separation tonight, and I want all assets frozen before sunrise." "No questions asked," Andrea simply replied. "Does he know you have control?" "No, and I don't want him to find out in time." Within 40 minutes, Andrea sent me a draft of the separation agreement and a temporary asset freeze order. I printed them using the mini printer in my suitcase, signed them, scanned, and sent them back. The bank accounts were now frozen to any outgoing transactions. The BMW Damon was driving legally under my name. I filed a request to suspend its insurance coverage, which meant Damon couldn't legally drive it come morning. Around 3 a.m., I closed the laptop. The room was dim, filled only with the sound of the waves and my steady heartbeat. I had lived many years in fear, trying to hold together a family that was rotting from within. But that night, I sat down, looked at everything I had built, and started to dismantle it, with my own hands. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. The ocean still whispered beyond the balcony, but inside me there was a strange calm. I made myself a cup of coffee, then turned on my new phone. The old one had been left behind in a drawer. Once I powered it off, Damon had no way to reach me. I checked Andrea's messages. All asset freeze orders had been processed overnight. The temporary separation documents had already been forwarded to the representing law office in the state. I read every confirmation line like checking the moorings of a ship drifting through a storm. Everything was secured. Nothing could slip away now. I put on a pale blue dress, sunglasses, and a wide-brimmed straw hat. I left the room shortly before 8. I strolled around the resort, smoothie cup in hand like any other tourist, walking calmly under the sunlit corridors. No one noticed me, and that was exactly what I wanted. Near the main lobby, I stopped at the souvenir shop. From there, I could see the front desk clearly, without being seen. And then I saw them. Damon and Ivy. He wore a cream silk shirt, hair neatly styled, but his face was visibly tense. Ivy stood beside him, No longer radiant and smug but irritated, she clutched her phone, texting non-stop. "I'm sorry, sir," the receptionist said softly but clearly. "Your card was declined. The system shows the account is no longer active." I saw Damon force a smile. He pulled out another card, then another. I had guessed right. He'd try every card he still believed was his. The second card failed. Ivy began to fidget. "Try again," Damon said, voice less calm. "Might be a connection error." But no, the third card also failed. "Perhaps you should contact your bank," the receptionist offered, still professional. But I saw her eyes flick to Ivy, then briefly scan the growing number of guests starting to take notice. "This is a mistake," Damon said, trying to smile again. "I'm a VIP here. We've booked 3 rooms for 4 nights. You can't just humiliate me over a technical glitch." Ivy chimed in, "Just use my card." I watched her dig through her purse and hand over a gleaming platinum card. The receptionist took it, swiped once. The screen flashed red. "Ma'am, this card also doesn't cover the current balance." Ivy's eyes narrowed. "That can't be. I only bought a few things." "The current total includes accommodations, spa services, minibar, all meals, and the ocean tour booking. Grand total $24,360. I saw Damon take half a step back, his lips pressed tight. His face was beginning to flush. Ivy turned to him and snapped. "You said you had it covered. You said your card would work." Her voice was rising. A few guests in the lobby began to turn their heads. An Asian woman gently pulled her young daughter away. 2 young men near the coffee bar pretended not to look, but were clearly listening. A security guard in a white button-down shirt stepped over, standing politely off to the side of the front desk. "We can temporarily store your luggage in our back room if you need to call someone for assistance," the receptionist offered, her expression still polite, but cool. "Do you know who I am?" Damon growled, but no one cared anymore. Ivy was already on the phone, pacing awkwardly toward the exit. Damon was left alone at the counter, surrounded by curious glances and murmurs. I tightened my grip on the smoothie, but didn't move. I didn't flinch. I simply watched, with the kind of silence that cuts deeper than words. A man who built his persona on disdain had just been stripped of his performance. In public, in front of nameless witnesses. And there was no obedient wife next to him to prop him up. I turned and walked toward the back patio. The sun had climbed higher, glittering over the sea. A breeze swept through my hair, carrying something heavy that had lived in my chest for years. And I knew this wasn't the end. But it was without a doubt the first time Damon knew he had lost. 3 days after I left the resort, I was staying in a small 2-bedroom apartment in St. Augustine. Quiet, modest, and far enough from Damon's reach. I barely slept those first few nights. Not out of fear he'd find me, but because my heart ached every time I thought of the kids. Ellie was only 8, still believing in simple things. If you're good, things will be okay. Noah, 11, was stubborn and sharp, but still needed comfort. And Aiden, 13, was teetering between duty and confusion, love and rebellion. I couldn't let my silence make them think I had given up. So I wrote. Not one letter. 3 pieces of my soul for each of them to keep. To Ellie. I chose purple floral stationery. Her favorite color. My handwriting shook, but I tried to keep it even. Dear Sunshine. I know things have felt strange lately. I'm not home every morning to do your hair. I'm not there to sing You Are My Sunshine when your tummy hurts. But sweet girl, I am still here, just somewhere safer. Becoming a better mom for you. I folded the letter and tucked in one of her old drawings. A Mother's Day card from kindergarten, with wobbly crayon lines and the words, Best Mom in the Galaxy. I'd once pressed it between the pages of my Bible. Now it was time to give it back to its rightful owner. To Noah. Noah liked facts, logic, clarity. So I wrote differently. My little thinker. You've always asked why, more than anyone, and I know you're wondering why I left. I didn't leave out of anger. Not out of weakness. I left to keep the best parts of myself safe. For you all. I reminded him of the time he had a high fever at 3, when Damon was traveling and I sat up all night cooling his forehead. I mentioned the volcano project we built together when he said, You're the only one who really gets me." I folded the letter with the tiny Lego robot I'd hidden away last year. Damon had called it a waste of money, but I'd bought it with my own tucked-away savings. To Aiden. The hardest one, my eldest. Quiet, guarded, but I knew he noticed more than he showed. "I know you're angry. Maybe at me. Maybe at Dad. Maybe at yourself for not knowing who to side with. But son, being our child doesn't mean choosing sides. You get to choose what's right." I reminded him of the first goal he ever scored in third-grade soccer, when he scanned the crowd and locked eyes with me. And the night before his first big test, when nerves kept him up, and I made hot cocoa and stayed up studying beside him until 2 in the morning. I included a small metal keychain engraved with "Stay Steady," a gift I had planned to give him on his next birthday. I brought the 3 envelopes to school, waiting until after classes let out, and handed them to Ms. Thomas, the librarian who had known our family for nearly a decade. "Layla," she said gently, her eyes concerned, "they still talk about you." I gave a soft smile. "They just need to know I haven't disappeared, and that love hasn't either." A week later, I got a message from a hidden number. "Mom, it's Noah. I read it. I miss you." Then from Aiden, just one word. "Thanks." On Sunday, I opened my apartment door and found a small bag on the doorstep. Inside was a container of muffins, the kind I used to bake, but clumsily packed in a school lunchbox. No note, but I knew who had left it. I sat down and hugged the bag to my chest. A quiet wave of emotion washed over me. With love and truth, each of my children was finding their way back. July 24th. Ellie's birthday. It rained from dawn. The sky hung low like a damp gray blanket, and I sat by the window, spinning a ring I'd taken off but hadn't thrown away. On the table was a small purple-wrapped gift box, tied with a silver ribbon. Inside was a beaded bracelet I had made by hand, using the same beads Ellie had picked at a local fair long ago. I didn't know if she would ever receive that gift. Damon had once said, "Anything involving you goes through my lawyer." But that afternoon, as the clock ticked past 4, the doorbell rang. I pulled the door open and everything in me stilled. My 3 children filled the doorway, soaked through but unshaken. Their clothes clung to their bodies, their shoes were caked in mud, and their eyes, their unforgettable eyes, looked exhausted, trembling but fiercely determined. Ellie was the first to throw herself into my arms, her pink birthday dress faded and clinging to her small frame. She hugged me like the world would collapse if she let go. "Mom," she sobbed, "I don't want to be there anymore. They had a party without asking what I liked. They invited Ivy's friends, not mine. And they forgot the kitten cake you promised last year." I knelt and stroked her soaked hair. Noah followed her in silently, taking off his jacket to reveal the backpack he'd carried for nearly 5 miles. We left after Ivy told Ellie to stop making a scene for crying. Aiden said enough was enough, so we left. Aiden waited by the door, taller than I remembered, but his face was filled with a storm of emotion, anger, pain, and something close to cautious hope. We walked. It was raining, but no one stopped us. Dad wasn't home. Ivy was busy on the phone, didn't even notice, and Ellie said, "I want Mommy Layla." So, we left. I paused. "Are you sure?" My voice caught in my throat. "Because if I hug you now, no one's going back." All 3 nodded. I pulled them inside and shut the door. The tiny apartment suddenly felt warm in the midst of the rain tapping at the windows. I handed them towels, dry clothes, and warmed up the water for Ellie's bath. Noah reheated leftover pizza from the night before. Aiden quietly helped me set the table, occasionally glancing toward his little sister, now bouncing around the bedroom, hugging the gift box I'd left out just in case. We ate dinner like we hadn't spent months apart. No talk of Ivy, no mention of Damon. Just stories about math homework, soccer team uniforms, and the homemade birthday cake I hadn't expected anyone to eat. Ellie blew out candles on the small cake I never thought would be used. Noah pulled out his phone to play the birthday tune. Aiden poured the milk, making sure neither of his siblings had to get up. That night, as I folded blankets for them to sleep in the living room, Aiden called me over. Mom, Ivy said you were selfish, that you left to escape, but I read your letter. I saw the bracelet you made for Ellie. I remember when I sprained my ankle and you stayed up all night with an ice pack. Ivy never once asked what I wanted for dinner. I sat beside him. You're not going back, are you? I whispered. Eden shook his head. I don't know what happens next, but I know you're the only one who never disappeared. You were quiet, but you were always there. I squeezed his hand, pressing my lips shut to stop the tears. That little apartment, while not as luxurious as Damon's house, became a real home. Not because of what was in it, but because of who had come back to it, the pieces of my heart that had found their own way home. Nearly 2 months after the kids returned, I received an email from my attorney, Andrea. The eviction order has been approved. Damon Morrison must vacate the Maple Creek Lane property within 7 days. He holds no ownership or legal rights to the estate. I read that brief message one early autumn afternoon as sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, casting golden patches over the wooden floor where Ellie was coloring, Noah was reading, and Aiden was building a bookshelf for me. No one knew, in that moment, that I had just closed the final chapter of a marriage I had sacrificed so much for. I never saw Damon leave that house, but from what old neighbors and mutual acquaintances told me, I learned he had screamed at the moving crew, called every lawyer he could think of, and even tried to reach me through alternate accounts. I didn't reply. Ivy had left 3 days before the eviction notice was posted. The woman who once walked into Damon's life as if she had won something vanished without a sound after her credit card got declined at a luxury boutique. She left no note, only an empty drawer and a slip of paper with 2 words, "I'm done." The BMW Damon drove, the one he boasted about as his success trophy, was towed away on a Thursday afternoon. A neighbor said he stood in the yard frantically making calls, but no account worked. No one answered. His consulting firm, once staffed with 8 employees, officially shut down when the lease was canceled after 3 months of unpaid rent. I wasn't surprised. Damon was always good at performing, but he had never truly built anything. He had only ever lived inside the image I helped create. And when the dust had settled, I knew it was time to send him the last thing I owed him. I spent a week compiling it, not out of anger, but from the memory of a woman who once loved, once endured, and once chose silence to protect her children. The document was 37 pages long, every page a slice of truth. $42,800 for his part-time MBA, which I paid for by working 2 extra jobs. $12,000 in home renovations on a house solely under my name. $68,000 he poured into a startup with his college friend, gone in 6 months, no explanation. I paid the debt. I listed every expense every year. I attached receipts, contracts, and bank letters. Then I added what couldn't be measured. 1,684 hours I worked as an unpaid accountant for his company. 27 client dinners I planned while playing the perfect wife so he could show off. 14 career opportunities I passed on so he could focus on his future. The final page held only 1 paragraph. Damon, you always thought I was just the woman beside you. But the empire you flaunted? I laid every brick, and now I return it to you. The same way you left me all those years ago. I sent that document via certified email CCing the lawyer. According to Andrea, Damon opened it at 10:14 a.m. on Monday and never replied. That evening, as I was folding clothes for the kids to prepare for the new school year, Aiden walked in holding the old phone Damon once gave him. The screen was lit up, showing a message. "Can you tell your mom that I'm sorry?" Damon didn't respond. He handed me the phone. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I deleted it. I closed the laptop. Ellie came in, showing off her new drawing. Noah asked what pasta we'd have tomorrow. Aiden invited me to go through old photo albums. And I smiled. Because what Damon lost wasn't me. It was family. 3 months after Damon received the eviction order, I signed a contract for a small ivory white house in the suburbs of Jacksonville, about a 30-minute drive from our old neighborhood. It had 3 bedrooms, an attic just big enough for Noah and Aiden to use as a study room, and a backyard where Ellie could plant strawberries. On move-in day, Ellie stood in the empty living room, spun around and shouted, "This new house smells like you." I laughed. "What does that smell like?" "Like cake, your hair and peace," she answered without hesitation. We painted the walls together. Ellie chose pastel pink, Aiden went for cool gray, and Noah argued fiercely to claim a corner for his LED-lit galaxy map. I didn't oppose a thing, because after all those years living in silence under someone else's control, I'd learned how to let my children be themselves. As for work, I started over from scratch. Back then, Damon's name was on the company, but I was the one drafting quotes, negotiating contracts, writing pitch decks. I used to think being a wife meant stepping back so the husband could shine, but it turned out that shine only existed because of the quiet sacrifices he never acknowledged. I called former clients one by one, rebuilt my profile, launched a new website. At first, I only hoped for a few small contracts to keep us afloat. But then, things went beyond expectations. Layla, I was hoping you'd break out on your own a long time ago, a former client, a marketing director in Atlanta, said during our first Zoom call. Your ex just talked loud and overpromised. You were the one delivering real solutions. Within 6 weeks, I had 7 steady clients. I hired a part-time assistant, a senior communications major who used to work at a local bookstore. I converted the old garage into an office. Aiden helped install lights, Noah painted the wall logo, and Ellie often brought down cookies during meetings, making every client call end with laughter. Don't ever close the office door, okay? Ellie once said. I like hearing you talk, you sound strong. I paused for a few seconds. I used to think Ellie only remembered my voice from lullabies. I didn't realize she was listening, even as I rebuilt my life. The kids changed too, but not because I forced them, because they began to understand. Noah, once distant, now casually slung his arm around my shoulder while grocery shopping. He asked about everything, how to pick ripe melons, why almond milk was better. But I knew what he really wanted was the closeness he thought he'd lost. Aiden, the quiet boy once torn inside, began journaling. I once found him typing in his room. Today, my mom negotiated with French clients. I didn't understand much, but her voice sounded firmer than my math teacher's. And Ellie, once loud and carefree, now often asked simple questions at bedtime that weighed heavily on my heart. Mom, if Dad says sorry, would you go back? I looked at her for a long time. No, Ellie. But I'll always forgive. Forgive to let go, not to return. She looked around, then whispered, I don't miss that place. This one feels like it hugs us. I turned on the nightlight, kissed her forehead. It hit me. I didn't have to be the perfect mother, just present, just me. I just needed to be myself. And that was enough. One foggy winter morning in Jacksonville, I received an email from Andrea. Just one short line. He signed the divorce papers, no negotiations. I looked out the window. Ellie was helping Noah with his scarf. Aiden was double-checking his STEM presentation for the school competition. The kitchen still smelt like the cinnamon waffles I'd just pulled from the oven. And I knew Damon had finally realized I was never coming back. Through old friends, I heard Damon now lived alone in a ground-floor unit in a run-down complex. Sparse furniture, no real light, nothing notable except a bent-back chair and a used fridge left behind by the previous tenant. No new car. He walked to the bus stop every morning, carrying the same briefcase he once used to woo big investors, now holding job applications that went unanswered. The old company was dissolved. Clients either returned to me or moved on. Ivy vanished last summer without a trace. Damon had nothing left to perform with, and no one left to perform for. Aiden said Damon once called, asking to meet, but Aiden stayed silent, then said clearly, I read everything Mom wrote. If you want to apologize, start with yourself, not us. Damon never called again. I didn't post online, didn't share comeback photos, didn't send bitter messages. I just lives better, stronger, and no longer tied to the man who once believed he held all the power. And then, one year-end evening, I printed out one final document. No email, no lawyer delivery. I placed my hand on each page, folded them carefully, and sealed them in a golden envelope labeled with my name. Layla Annette Morrison, the things no one ever acknowledged. Inside were 12 detailed pages, not with numbers but with all the things I had done that Damon never knew about. Kept track of your mom's medication schedule for 3 years. Taught myself Excel late at night to manage the company's budget when the accountant quit. Told the kids you were on a business trip when you were actually at a resort with Ivy. Submitted Aiden's competition entry when you forgot the deadline. Stayed in the scorching sun through Noah's game. Ended up fainting from heat, but I never left. I ended it with a handwritten note. My silence was never surrender. It was the last boundary I had left to protect the part of me you could never touch. I never sent that envelope. I placed it in the nightstand drawer right beneath the old ring box and the necklace my mother left me. Because Damon didn't need to read it. He was already living the consequences of those pages, not through words, but through the emptiness he used to call freedom. On New Year's Eve, we sat in the backyard, the four of us wrapped in blankets, watching fireworks from the next neighborhood. Ellie dozed off on my lap, still clutching the same old teddy bear. Aiden whispered, "Mom, we're okay now, right?" I gave a quiet smile, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. Words felt small in that moment. But everything he needed was already here. And in that moment I realized, the most valuable thing isn't revenge. It's surviving the pain without losing yourself. Layla's story is a quiet yet powerful reminder that sometimes silence is the strongest form of self-respect. Instead of arguing or lashing out, she chose to step back, rebuild her life from the rubble with her own hands and a heart that once broke. In the real world, not all revenge needs to be loud. Some victories come from letting go, living well, and letting others face the emptiness they created. What do you think about Layla's choice and her quiet but fearless journey? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more moving and heartfelt stories about family and life.